Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel and hanging out with me a little bit. And guys, today we're going to be talking about how to deal with rapidly rising water in the springtime of the year, because a lot of times in the spring we get heavy rains. For example, one of the reasons I wanted to do this video is I'm down at Kentucky Lake right now fishing that Toyota Series tournament, and the lakes came up 4 or 5 feet in the last few days. So I sort of want to have a discussion on rising water and what the bass do a little bit. And sometimes it's a mystery, sometimes we got it figured out, but I want to give you guys my experiences that I've had over the past, 4 or 5 decades fishing when that water comes up. So we'll get into that in today's episode. Also, guys, quick invitation. I just like to invite everybody to please hit that subscribe button here at Advanced Bass Fishing. Free and easy to do so. We're really trying to get to that 15,000 subscriber mark, and that'd be much appreciated. And also, guys, thank you very much for me and my family, for everybody that's been using all the links I put in every video description. I know you guys hear me talk about it, but just want to let you guys know how much I appreciate that, especially you guys that have used and bookmarked that Tackle Warehouse link in the description of the video. Really appreciate that. Okay, guys, when you're talking about rising water, there's a lot of variables that come with that. It's not just as simple as saying the water's coming up, the water's rising, because there's variables surrounding that. Now, one of the biggest variables that surround rising water is how fast the water is coming up and how the water clarity either is changing or is maintaining the same as it's coming up. Now, it can be a lot of different things. Say, for example, if you get a really big rain that's just like flooding all the creeks and flooding all the feeder, tributaries that come into the lake, and it happens real quick, a lot of times you can get what I call fresh mud coming in the lake, where it's literally like chocolate milk and there's a lot of particulate in the water. And, depending upon how, hard they're pulling the lake, sometimes that muddy water can stay in one area of the lake, or if they're pulling the water hard, that muddy water will go through the whole system, and it'll be muddy from one end of the lake to the other. That's what's happened at Kentucky Lake now. The Kentucky Lake is muddy from one end to the other. So that's a variable with that. Now, the other variable is if there's a slow rise. Let's say, for example, the ground saturated and you're getting consistent rain, but you're not getting those super heavy torrential downpours that actually cause lots of water to come into the lake. But you're having the ground saturated, you're having systems come through, a lot of precipitation, and the rise is steady but incremental. It doesn't come real quick. Now, normally what happens with that is you don't get real muddy. It's like sometimes you can maintain your water clarity even if the lake comes up. Now, this is really evident like in some of the highland impoundments. Say, for example, like Bull Shoals or Beaver Lake or Table Rock, where I fish. A lot of times if we have just a wet month and the ground saturated, the lake will come up, but it doesn't get muddy. So you have some clean water even though the water is high. Now, so let's talk about those two scenarios. And there's everything in between. Sometimes it can be just in between. You got a little stain to the water. So let's sort of go over everything with that. First of all, you can't say that this is a blanket statement, like this is what the fish do. I saw that today in the tournament. There are situations out there where there's always exceptions to the rule, but I sort of want to talk about the majority of the time that you can sort of bank on a little bit. There's always outliers, but normally what happens is if you have a lot of rain coming in and it muddies the water up, you have to find the water that is not mud. You have to search some areas that have a little bit of clarity. It doesn't have to be much. There's a big difference between having that much water clarity and having that much water clarity. There's a difference between having 1 inch and 4 inches, big time. And when it gets really muddy like that and you got a lot of fresh particulate mud coming in, you really got to search for just a little bit better clarity, especially if the water temperature is below 60 degrees. And sometimes you don't know where that's at. Sometimes it can be in the back of the creeks, it can be out on the main lake, but always look for, you want to have at least 4 inches of visibility. I have found in bass fishing, if you have less than 4 inches of visibility, it's very difficult to catch a bass. So that's the number one thing. Now, If you have a situation like that where it's dirty, most of the time the bass will move up shallow with that dirty water unless it just shoots way up. And that's what I like to move to the bank and just fish shallow targets, try to concentrate in less than 3 foot of water. On the other end of the spectrum, if you have that water coming up and it's rising and it's getting pretty high and your water stays clear, a lot of times the fish will not move up into that shallow cover. Let's say, for example, if the water comes up 5 or 6 feet on the lake that you're fishing pretty quick over a course of a week or so, but it doesn't get muddy. In a situation like that, the logical thinking would be that the fish are going to move up in that flooded cover, but a lot of times they don't. And if they do, it's the small fish. What happens in that clear water environment, if that water comes up quick, is those fish will stay at the same level that they have always been. So in other words, if your lake level is, say, at 10, and then it rises to 15, if that water stays clear, those fish are going to stay on that 10-foot level. They're not going to move up. So that's why a lot of times if the water comes up and it gets flooded into the bushes, a lot of guys still catch them like dragging a football head jig or a Carolina rig or a deep diving crankbait out in 5 to 10 foot of water where that little shoreline was. That's just something the bass do that doesn't really make, much sense with that. And then there's gradients in between, that's just two extremities. But overall, even though that sounds like, well, that makes sense and, it may be true more times than not, a lot of times it doesn't work like that. And that's just one of the things about fishing that it just makes it so difficult, because there's a lot of things we don't understand about what the fish do. It's just like today, the water's muddy here at Kentucky Lake, and I saw guys live scoping out in the middle of the bays and water visibility that, clear, just dirty water, and I saw them catching bass out there. So there's always some bass that are doing something different, but you sort of have to put yourself around what the majority of the bass are doing, and you also have to put yourself around the type of water that you like to fish. You may like to throw a spinnerbait, you may like to flip, you may like to throw a crankbait. And so if you look and hunt for that type of water, there's usually always a few fish to be caught with it. But in general, that's that's sort of the gist of what I want to talk about, is when you get that heavy particulate and dirty water that comes up quick, move up shallow. And a lot of times, guys, move up and fish hard structures, like fish rock or gravel, something like that. Don't move up into the flooded cover real soon. A lot of times they'll get shallow, but they'll get on rock or gravel or clay or something. And then again, on the clear water situations, you might stay a little bit deeper and you'll probably do better. I'll tell you one tournament I remember fishing. I fished a tournament at Table Rock about 5 years ago, and the lake shot up like 10 foot, and there was like 6 or 7 foot of water in the willow trees and the buck brushes, and a perfect flipping. The water visibility is like 3 or 4 foot. And guys, I went out, I probably caught 20 fish that day, but I never had a keeper. They were all non-keepers in that flooded, cover. And the guy that won the tournament won it deep cranking, throwing a DD22 out in about 15 foot of water when there was water flooded in the bushes. So you just never know, man. Just if you're bass fishing and you think, well, God, this is so frustrating and complicated, I'm never going to figure this out, then join the club, because I've been doing this for 50 years and I still get puzzled and frustrated too. So that's just part of fishing, man. But anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk later.